great honor to be here. As the brother told in the introduction, my name is Joram van Klaveren. I'm a former member of the Dutch Parliament, and I was a representative for the most anti-Islam political party in Europe. It's called the PVV, or the Freedom Party. Better? Okay, thanks. I was asked to share my story, so I will. So I'll start from the beginning. I was born in 1979 in Amsterdam, in a pretty regular family: father, mother, brother, older brother, younger brother, and a sister, and a cat and a goldfish. And the only thing that was a little off compared to the rest of the city in Amsterdam was that we were pretty conservative. And Amsterdam still is, but way back in the 80s it was even more liberal than it is today. So we were a little off, and we were really practicing Christians. Nowadays, you have a lot of people who are Christian in name and not so much in what they do. But we were old school, so to say. So we were all baptized as children. We all went to church. We all went to we call it church school, like the Masjid, so to say, where you learn, but then from the Christian faith. We all got biblical names. My grandfather also was a minister in church, so it was pretty Christian. And the father of one of my best friends was also a minister in church. And he was the one who first made me read something about Islam. He had a lot of books in his library, because he was a minister, of course, and a lot of books that spoke about Islam were very negative. They were written by the big scholars, the big names in the Christian tradition, like Zwingli and Erasmus and Martin Luther, and I'm talking about centuries ago. And they wrote about Islam in a negative way because of the context back then, because you had the Ottoman Empire and it was fighting Europe. Europe was Christian, Ottoman Empire was Muslim, of course. So those people were scholars and they were theologians, so they legitimized their position from their expertise, and it was the Christian faith. So they wrote about the enemy, in their eyes, the Ottoman Empire, and it said those people are messed up. The whole country is messed up. The whole empire is messed up. Why? Because they have the religion of the devil. So I was brought up with the idea from a theological point of view that Muslims had the religion of the devil. And we say astaghfirullah, but Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, was seen as the Antichrist. So Dajjal in Muslim terms. So it was pretty negative. And when I finished high school and I did all the things I had to do as a youngster, I ended up studying comparative religion at the Free University in Amsterdam. But remarkably enough, the first day of me going to college was September 11, 2001. So it was the day of the attack on the World Trade Center. So I already was kind of biased towards Islam and Muslims. And then I saw this happening, and it was all over the news, also in the Netherlands: terrorism, Islam, Muslims, scary, evil, etc. So it was very negative in all aspects. So I thought, well, it's just a confirmation of what I already knew, because they have the religion of the devil, so they do things that are devilish, so to say. But during my college years, there was also a famous filmmaker in the Netherlands who was murdered in the streets of Amsterdam. His name was Theo van Gogh. And it was 2 blocks away from our own house, my old house, and they slit his throat, they shot him, and the guy who did it called himself a jihadi, and he said, I did it because he insulted Islam. So I thought, okay, apparently jihad came to Europe now, so I have to do something to protect the country against this evil cult called Islam, with all this Satan worship, killing people, doing all this horrible stuff. So I thought, what's the most effective thing to fight this problem is go into politics, because you can change the law. So in the same year that Theo van Gogh was murdered, this famous politician from the Netherlands, Geert Wilders, the guy with the blonde hair, started his own political party. He was already a known politician because he was very strong on certain topics, especially Islam. But now he said, okay, I'll start my own political party. And like for example, I don't know how it is in the US, but I can imagine that the Democratic Party is more like social democrats and the Republicans more old school about the money. And in the Netherlands, you have tens of parties that have all have their own topic, so to say. And he says, well, the Green Party has the environment and I have Islam. So I'm going to fight Islam. That's the core message. That's the reason why I founded this party, is fighting Islam. Islam has to leave our country. And in the most perfect scenario, it's going to leave Europe and in the end, maybe the world. So there was this is why the Freedom Party was founded, and this is what the Freedom Party did. So I thought, well, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. So I wrote him a letter, and I said, well, can I join you? Can I help you? Can I do something for you? And he said, yeah, of course, finish your studies, and then you can become a policy advisor for the Freedom Party. So that's what I did. So I, from the beginning, I worked on this ideology of the Freedom Party. And then years and years later, I became a member of parliament myself, and I was the spokesperson on the topic of anti-Islam. Like it was mentioned in the introduction, I tried to shut down all Islamic schools in the Netherlands. I tried to close all mosques, ban the Quran, tax wearing a hijab. Most crazy thing now, but all these things, were things I tried to push. And make legislation on. And alhamdulillah, I failed, but that was what I did back then. But in 2014, I got into a fight with Geert Wilders, with the political leader of the party, because he was, during a rally, he asked the crowd, do you want more or less Moroccan people in the Netherlands? And the whole crowd started shouting, less, we want less Moroccans in the Netherlands. And then he said, that's perfect, that's what I want, so vote for me. I'll make it happen, I'll make all the Moroccan people go. But I was the spokesperson on the topic of integration, immigration, and Islam. And I didn't know that he was about to say that, because I was in my own constituency, because it was election time. And so I called him. I said, well, what is this? Where's the anti-Islam part? Because you're only talking about Moroccans now, but we're fighting Islam. We're fighting crazy Muslims, but not so much Moroccan people. I know most of Moroccan people are Muslim, but not all. And a lot of people don't know that, but there were also working Moroccan people, Turkish people, even Somali people for the Freedom Party. And of course, they were all non-Muslims. Most of the times they were like murtad, like ex-Muslims. And Geert Wilders always said, well, those people who left the religion are the best soldiers, because they know the dangers of Islam. That's why they left it. They hate it, so they can fight for us, with us. So I told Geert, it's kind of crazy that you now say like all Moroccans have to leave, while we also have Moroccan people, ethnically spoken, fighting our fight with us. So it's like betrayal. That's how I felt it. And he said, well, it's not. So I said, yeah, it is. But you have to add something to the story, because I'm the guy who has to defend this whole story in Parliament. So I want you to add something anti-Islam to it, or anti-whatever, as long as it's not about the Moroccan people, and it has to be about Islam. And you can say Muslims or whatever, but he said, no, I'm not going to do it, this is it. And I said, okay, then we have a problem. And I said, yeah, what are you going to do? I said, well, if you don't change it, I'll leave the party. And he said, well, I don't think you will leave. And the next day I left. But I was still very anti-Islam, and I was still in Parliament. And then I had a long-held desire of writing an anti-Islam book. So that's what I did. I thought, well, okay, now I have the time to make my own agenda. I don't have to do all the debates. I'll do something else, because I also was not someone who had to speak for the people, etc. And I thought, okay, people voted for me because I was anti-Islam. So I wanted to explain to the people why Islam is such a danger. Why do we hate Islam? Why is Islam something to get rid of? And I didn't want to explain it in one-liners, but real like a theological and academic book, because in the end, I studied comparative religion. I was a practicing Christian. So I wanted to explain it from my point of view. But when I started writing the book, I made a comparison between the God concept in Christianity and the God concept in Islam. And I started with the God concept in Christianity. And for the people who don't know, in Christianity, a God exists out of three people. You have God the Father, God the Son, Isa, peace and blessings be upon him, Jesus, and you have the Holy Spirit. And those two are three persons, but they are one in essence. That's the dogma of Christianity. And when I was younger, I always thought I couldn't get my head around it because it sounded illogical, and I think it is. But back then, of course, I said, well, I wanted to understand what it is. And when I asked some ministers about it, they said, well, you cannot really understand it. So I started asking, did God die at a certain moment? Because you say Jesus Christ died on a cross. If he is God or a part of God, then God died. And in the Bible, it says God is eternal. So how can God, who is eternal, die? So has there been a moment in time that there was no God? Or half God or whatever. And he said, no, don't ask questions like that. It's too complex. And I said, okay, perhaps I'm not smart enough, so I'll leave it. But it was also the part of the resurrection and the crucifixion as a condition. You had to believe in the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ. If you don't believe that, then, according to the church I was brought up in, you'd go to hell, because that's the only way to salvation. So when I was younger, I also asked, why are prophets like Adam and Noah, Nuh, Ibrahim, Abraham, why are they all in hell? And then the minister said, why would you say they are in hell? That's a crazy thing to say. And I said, well, if the only way to salvation is believing in the resurrection and the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, they couldn't believe in his crucifixion and resurrection because he wasn't even born yet. And they didn't believe that. So if that's the only way, they are in hell. He said, no, in the early days, he had another way. So I said, no, there are two ways to heaven now. And they said, no, it's changed. I said, well, why would God make it more difficult for us then? Because it was too complex for me. So he said, well, don't ask questions like that, learn, study, etc. And in the end, you will understand. Well, I never understood it, but I accepted it just like you accept more things. Everybody in my family believed this. So I thought, okay, perhaps I'm really not smart enough and too young. But now, of course, to forward to me writing this anti-Islam book, I had to explain it to the world because I wanted to write this book. And I thought, okay, maybe it's too hard. So I start with the God concept in Islam. I knew they have Tawheed, just one God. It's very simple. It's clear. So let's start with that. But of course, I wanted to have more information. So I started writing to all these authorities on Christianity, on Judaism, but also on Islam. And one of the people I wrote to when it came to Islam was Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad from Cambridge University. But back then I didn't know that he was a Muslim. So his English name is Tim Winter. And I was just looking for a scholar from a university that is known, of course, Cambridge is known university, and he was a scholar and said specialized in Islam, Islamic history, etc., etc. So I thought that's the perfect guy. But later on, after I sent him this email, I found out he's a Muslim. So I thought, okay, it's kind of strange, me as a foreigner asking this guy, can you help me writing an anti-Islam book while he is a Muslim? So I thought, okay, he will never answer me. But he did. After 6 weeks on a Saturday evening, I got a very extensive email, and he started answering all these questions that I had in my email, and he started refuting the things that I said. And he said, well, I want to help you. Sounds crazy, but I want to help you write this book, but you have to promise that you read all the books and articles that I sent to you. So reread all your old books so you feel this anti-Muslim vibe again. But at the same time, promise to read all the books and articles that I sent to you. And we're going to cross-read. So you read book one of yourself, then I say, okay, read this book from my list. Read book two, read my book two, etc., etc. So I did it. Took about 3 years, a little longer. But during this time, I started seeing things a little bit different because he said, well, we start your anti-Muslim books, that's okay. But we also start with the Bible because you wanted to write this book from a theological perspective as well. You are a Christian, so we use the Bible. And he said, well, let's look at what Jesus said about God. Because you wanted to explain in chapter 1, God concept in Islam, God concept in Christianity. You said we start with Islam, so let's see what Jesus Christ had to say about God, because, and that's what he said, I think Jesus Christ had the same concept of what we find in the Quran. And I said, well, I don't think so, but I said, okay, let's read it. And then he said in Mark, that is one of the books in the New Testament. For the people who don't know, the Bible exists out of two parts. You have the Old Testament, that's the same part that the Jewish Bible is. And then you have the New Testament. And the New Testament is about Jesus' life up till, so to say, Yawm al-Qiyamah, the end of times, and all the predictions. And part 1 is about creation and the history of Musa, Ibrahim, etc., up till Jesus. The only difference between the Jewish Bible and the Christian Old Testament is that it's in a different order. But the content is the same, and the Christians have as something which differs from the Jewish Bible is this New Testament about Jesus, because the Jews say Jesus is not the Messiah, he was a fraud, or he was just a normal person. But whatever, he wasn't not the Messiah. So in this second part, so in the New Testament, you have this book. It's called Mark, the Gospel of Mark. And there, this is a passage that Jesus walks in the streets, and one day someone goes up to him and says, "Oh, good man, how do I gain paradise? So how can I go to heaven?" That's what they ask Isa, peace and blessings be upon him. And Jesus says to his man, "Why do you call me good? Only God is good." And I thought that's kind of strange, because I was taught he is God. And now someone saying to him, "Hey, good man," he said, "Don't call me good, only God is good." So I thought, okay, perhaps he was like maybe a little, I don't know. So I was reading, and in the second part of the same book of Mark, there was the Jews, they tried to trick him in a way. So they asked him, what is the most important commandment that Musa got? And then they said, well, if he says the wrong thing, we got him, we can say he's a fraud. And he said, the most important commandment, and then he repeated what they call the Jewish Shema. It's like almost a Shahada of the Jews. And he said, "Hear, O people of Israel, your Lord is one. There is only one God. Believe in one God." So, and then I thought, well, that's kind of strange that we have Jesus saying to someone, "Don't call me good, only God is good." And then he says there is only one God, pray to just this one God. So I thought, okay, perhaps the church teaches something else than what's in the Bible. So I said, okay, maybe I can accept this whole oneness of God. Maybe it's the same. There's not so much difference between what we read in the Bible when it comes to the words of Jesus compared to what we read in the Quran. So I said, okay, that's something. But of course, I was writing an anti-Islam book, so I was not looking for things similar or whatever, or positive things. I was looking for bad stuff. And then, of course, I was very happy that we still had this bump, so to say, in the person of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, because I thought he was the Antichrist. He was the most dangerous and most horrible man ever lived, because he did all this horrible stuff. And then Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad said, well, let's read the Muslim sources. Not so much the Christian sources, because he said, I know you studied comparative religion, and he also was a teacher at the university where I got my degree many years before I was there. So he said, I know the curricula. So, and he says, but what you read now, what you learned, is all from secular people or from Christians or Hindus or Jews writing about Islam. It's not from the Muslim sources. So in the end, he says, if you want to know more about Christianity, read the books from the Christians. It's logical. You're not going to read books from atheists to know what Christians believe. And he says, now you want to know more about the Muslims, so read the Muslim sources. So that's what I did. And he said one of the books that he advised me was a book called Muhammad, His Life Based on the Earliest Sources. And it was written by a guy called Martin Links. The book is over 100 years old. It's from the UK. And it was for the first time that I saw the Prophet as a husband and as a teacher and as a general and as a political leader and as a merchant, because the picture I had in my mind was like a warlord and that's it. And now I was reading about this man and I said, well, it's quite impressive what I read and how he treated other people and what he did. And that's, apparently there were some miracles as well. So I thought, okay, maybe he was less evil than I thought. But that doesn't mean that he was a good man. He was an impressive man. There are more impressive leaders in the world. But then I came across the story of Hind. And Hind, of course, you know that probably better than I do. She was the wife of Abu Sufyan. Back then he was, of course, an enemy of the Muslims and Islam. and she gave, so to say, money to someone to kill the favorite uncle of the Prophet, Hamza, in the battlefield. And that was what happened. So Hamza was killed, and they cut off his ears, and they cut off his nose. They even took, and correct me if I'm wrong, a bite out of his liver. So he was really, it was horrible. And the Prophet was very sad. So I was reading this book, and in the end it said the Muslims came into power in Mecca. All the enemies were defeated, and the Muslims were ruling the city. But then one of the Sahaba, so one of the followers of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, this girl, this woman, Hind, she's still here. What we're going to do with her? And I thought, okay, this is the part now, it's going to be fun, right? She's going to be crucified or eaten by lions or stoned to death or whatever. I said, now something horrible will happen. But I was reading, and then he said, well, I cannot look at her for what happened yet, but bloodshedding is over. If she wants to leave, let her go. If she wants to stay, these are the new rules for the Muslims. And I thought, well, that's kind of strange for the Antichrist to forgive someone who killed a relative, a favorite uncle even. So I thought, okay, maybe he was in it for the money, for the women or the fame or whatever. He was not, it could be. So he's a forgiving guy. He was very, very impressive. He did a lot of good things, but of course he's not a prophet. And then I read this story about Ibrahim, his son. And I thought, because I thought he was a deceiver, right? Or he was into for the money. And then in pre-Islamic area of the Arabian Peninsula, they believed that when there was like an eclipse, that was like a sign from the gods, because they believed in more gods than one. And if someone died that day or someone was born, it was a special, perhaps a future king or someone special. There was the superstitious belief they had back then. And that day that Ibrahim, the son of the prophet, died, there was an eclipse. So it was very easy for him to say, I told you so, I'm a prophet, look at the eclipse. My son died that day, I'm special. But he didn't. He said, no, that's, of course, I'm very sad. Child is dead, but this is just a natural phenomenon. It's the moon and the sun and the stars. Everything is created by the Creator, by Allah, but it's not a sign for this child to die or whatever. And I thought that's kind of strange. If you had one opportunity to deceive a lot of people at once, there was this moment, and especially that moment, he said, no, that's not the case. So I thought, okay, maybe he is honest. But then I was adding it up. I thought, okay, maybe he's an impressive guy. He's honest. He's forgiving. So okay, he's definitely not the Antichrist, and perhaps he was a good man. I don't know, but he's not a prophet. But then I thought to myself, if I'm writing this anti-Islam book, because I was heading in the wrong direction for the purpose of the book, of course, I thought, I have like arguments. Why do I believe that Jesus, Abraham, Noah, and all the others are prophets, and I don't believe that he is a prophet? What are my arguments for that? And in the Bible, because I was still a Christian, of course, you have in the book of Deuteronomy in the Old Testament, there is like a prediction that after Musa, after Moses, peace and blessings be upon him, there will be someone else, a new prophet. And the Christians say it's about Jesus Christ, peace and blessings be upon him. But when I was reading it, I thought it's almost like it's about Prophet Muhammad, because one of the things they say is that this man that will come, he will be from the lineage of Ibrahim. And I thought, okay, he is out because he's not from the line of Isaac. And then I thought, okay, he had two sons, of course. There's also Ismail. So I said, okay, maybe if Isaac, Ismail, maybe he's from Ismail, so okay, that's a light check. And then the other point is that they said he will talk about the oneness of God, and God will put his words in his mouth. So he will talk, he will say what God says, and it will be about the oneness of God and the justice, so to say. And I thought, okay, we can say a lot about the Muslims and about Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings to you, but he did talk about one God. And they believe, of course, the Muslims, I thought back then, they believe that he spoke the words of the Creator. So I said, okay, check. But there's also a part that says he will bring a new law and he will create a new community. And then I thought of the Bible, because in the Bible there is a passage that the Jews and Jesus are in a discussion. And then the Jews say, what are you doing with our law? And then he literally says in the Bible, I'm not adding one letter to your law, not one. I'm not changing anything. I'm just explaining to you that you've gone astray, so to say. But I thought he really says, I'm not changing anything. And of course, in the Quran, I knew that it said, today I completed your religion. So there were things changed, there were things added, things left out. So this is the complete final version of the revelation of God, so to say. And I thought, okay. And he founded a new community as well, in a hostile environment, just like Moses. So I thought Moses and Muhammad, peace and blessing be, are more alike than Muhammad and Jesus. And all these predictions it looks more like it's about Muhammad than it's about Jesus. So I thought, okay, maybe he's a prophet. And then I thought, okay, that's really messed up, because now I say there is one God, and I say Muhammad is probably a messenger. So I thought that is the kind of a wannabe shahada. So I thought, okay, stop. And I already left politics. I was not in the parliament anymore. Back then I was working for we call it the EO. It's the Evangelical Organization. It's the biggest television organization in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is a very liberal, secular country, like I said, but funny enough, the biggest television station is an evangelical station, because we have our own Bible Belt as well. They're very rich, and they have a lot of power, and they have this own broadcasting organization. And I was working for them back then. I was the spokesperson for the conservative Christians on the radio. So I thought it's kind of strange that I'm working for evangelical organizations, being the spokesperson on radio about the conservative ideas of Christianity. And I'm writing this book against Islam. And now, because of this writing, I say, okay, there is one God and Muhammad is his messenger. So I said, okay, I'll stop the book, because I will mess up my own life. Because, of course, all my friends are from the Freedom Party. Everybody is very Christian. I'm working for this evangelical organization. So I stopped the whole project, because who cares? Nobody knows I'm writing this book anyway. So I stopped it. But when I was trying to put all the books away, I had a shelf in my writing room, so to say, and because there were so many books, the shelf broke, and then all these books fell on the floor. And one of the books that fell on the floor was the Quran. Of course, there was like a translation of the Quran, and it felt open. So, like, when a book falls over like this. So, and I was throwing all these books in the box. And when I threw this translation of the Quran in the box, I picked it up, but somehow I looked at where my thumb was, and my thumb was on an ayat from Surah 22, ayat 46, and it says, in the translation, of course, it's not the eyes that are blind, but the hearts inside. And then I thought, that really is my issue, because nobody forced me to write a book. Nobody forced me to say, these are the arguments or whatever. Nobody even knew I was writing this book except my wife. So in the end, I thought, yeah, it's kind of strange. I say in my mind, with my ratio, my brain, there is one God and Muhammad is his messenger, because these are the rational arguments. But still, I really didn't want to become a Muslim. So it was not a logical thing. But I still hated Islam, and I didn't want to be a Muslim. So I thought, okay, this really is something from the heart. It's like an emotional problem almost. And because you don't want to mess around with your eternity, so to say. So I thought to myself, okay, let's do like a little prayer. And I said, Lord, I don't care if Christianity is true or Islam is true. I just want to have like 100% certainty, a sign this is the correct way. And if it's Christianity, I'll be 100% Christian forever. And if it's Islam, I'll become Muslim. And then, I told this earlier, I expected like maybe like an angel appearing or something else, but nothing like that happened, of course. So I went to bed, but the next morning when I woke up, I felt very calm and very secure. and very at ease, so to say. And I thought to myself, I think I'll become a Muslim. And but back then it was still in my head. And then my wife woke up, and I told my wife, honey, I think I will be a Muslim. Yeah, and then she looked at me very strangely, and she said, yeah, I think we have to put the dishes in the machine. So, and I didn't know really what does the dishes have to do with me becoming a Muslim. And then she says, well, I'll explain it to you. I'm not totally crazy, and I'm not a retard or something, because I saw you writing this book. And in the beginning, you had a lot of books very hostile towards Islam. One of the first books I used is called, in Dutch, Endgame, the coming war between the West and Islam. And she said, and you ended up with this book, Islam, the Misunderstood Religion. So she says, I saw something change. And now she says, well, I'm a Christian, I'm not a Muslim. But if there's not a problem for you as a Muslim man, and if you really believe Islam with your heart and soul, yeah, who am I? But if there's not a problem for you to be married to a Christian woman, and you stay sweet for me and the babies, because we had 3 little daughters, she says, then I have no problem with it, and life goes on. And if life goes on, there are some dishes from the guests yesterday, so we have to fill the... And of course, this was the start, and we have many talks about a lot of things, and I had to tell the whole world, and it was not so much fun as this. But alhamdulillah, in the end, I became Muslim, and I'm still very happy that I am. So I want to thank you for listening, and because of time, maybe if there are some questions, we can try to answer these.
Given the recent Amsterdam riot, the football match, of course, I listened to some interviews of Dutch citizens who know the truth, what really happened, and they come and trying to portray what the mainstream media, which seems to be, again, under the control of elites. So would like to get some your insight into the Dutch society, how much they know about Muslims and Islam, and this kind of propaganda through the media. Does it really make them more anti-Islam, or they have some awareness about what Muslims and Islam is? So if you could share some insight as a Dutch citizen of the common majority of the population's understanding and attitude towards Muslims there.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. Media, of course, they play a role when it comes to the way people perceive certain news topics. But when it comes to Islam, it's not... Often a lot of people say Europe is very anti-Islam. And it is true, it is anti-Islam when it comes to policies. But most of the people, they don't really care. They're not hostile towards Muslims. It's not if you walk down the street as a Muslim in whatever Dutch sin that people will attack you or something. Nobody cares. That's the point. It's very secular. So they think, okay, you believe in fairy tales, just like the Christians and whatever. It's all BS. We don't believe it. But they're not very hostile towards you. But when it comes to policymakers and new laws, these are very hostile. But that is because we have like a minority that is very vocal and very powerful. There was my old party combined with some very extreme Christian organizations, and they have a lot of power. And they are pushing this anti-Islam agenda. And it is very easy in Europe. Like I mentioned before, in the centuries ago, there was this hostility between the Ottoman Empire and, of course, Europe. But it's also the northern part of Africa that later on, of course, came into Spain, and then they founded Andalusia. For the Europeans, it's in their culture almost to see Islam as a threat. So it's very, and it's still there. I perhaps you know the story about the croissant. For the people who don't know the story about the croissant, and it's not a call for a boycott for the croissant, but it is a very anti-Islam sandwich. And it's a, no really, and it's a symbol, and that's why I tell you, it's a symbol of how in Europe a lot of things are very anti-Islam, but unknown, but it is there. And in 1683, there was this war between the Ottoman Empire and the Christian. It's the last big war, and it was about Vienna. They call it the Gates of Vienna. There's also, if you look into far-right organizations or websites, there are a lot of things related or pointing to this Battle of Vienna or the Gates of Vienna. Well, in 1683, the Ottomans were defeated by the Christians in Vienna. So they were driven out of Europe, and then the Ottomans were gone, so to say. That was the beginning of the end for the Ottoman Empire. And the Christians won. And so a lot of people were happy, and people made sandwiches in the form of a half moon. That's a croissant. That's in French, croissant means crescent moon. And they said that's a symbol of the Ottoman Empire because they had flags with 3 crescent moons on it. So they said, we break this bread, we break this sandwich, we break the Ottoman Empire, and we celebrate it while eating them. So, and that's still there. Of course, nobody knows it anymore, but it's just to show you that anti-Islam sentiments are very deeply rooted in European culture. And there's another example. In the year 732, there was this Battle of Poitiers. It was in the south, or not really the south, middle south of France. And the Muslims came from Spain up into France. And there was this guy called Charlemagne. Maybe you ever heard of this guy. It means, if you translate it in English, man with the hammer. He was a very big, tall man, very fat guy as well, but he was very, very strong. He was like a little giant, so to say. And he was a general in the army, and he defeated the Muslims in Poitiers. But back then, a lot of people think it was a battle between Christians and Muslims. It wasn't. There were a lot of Europe wasn't Christian at all. Some parts were already Christian, but there were also a lot of parts that were still heathen, so to say. They were living in their Christian jahiliyyah, so to say. So they were still praying to trees and moon, stars, etc. They had their tree gods. So these people were fighting against the Christians fighting against them. There were Muslims fighting the Christians, and Christians fighting the Muslims, the heathens against the Muslims. So it was like a mess. Everybody's fighting against each other. But when the Muslims came, there was more unity, especially in the south of Spain. It became Andalusia, and the nickname of Andalusia, even by the non-Muslims back then, was paradise, because it was stable. You had fountains, you could drink fresh water, so it was a very good place to be back then. We're talking about ages ago, of course. But then they fought against this man Charlemagne, and Charlemagne defeated them and drove them out. And 30 years later, and that is the oldest written proof we have of Europeans identifying themselves. And in this letter, someone asks one of the eyewitnesses, who did we fight against? Because they're gone now, but who were these people? And he said, those were the followers of Mahomet. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him. He said, okay, and who did we fight with against them? He said, with the Europeans. And he said, okay, what is the Europeans? Because there was no collective European soul or whatever. And he said, the non-Muslims. So the oldest written proof we have of Europeans identifying themselves is non-Muslim. So that's really deeply rooted. And then, of course, you have all these other topics and events that happened. For example, 1683 with the croissant, but also like every city has its own symbol. I don't know if Dallas has a symbol, but when you go, for example, to Amsterdam, you see a red flag with a black stripe and 3 white crosses. That's a symbol of Amsterdam. If you go to Rotterdam, it's green, white, green, and there's like a symbol of a lion or whatever. Well, in some parts of the Netherlands, but also in Germany, Belgium, the northern of France, you have symbols of cities, and you see a duck without feet and without a beak. And it's called a merlet. It's from French, it's merlet. It means a duck without beak and feet. It's a kind of strange symbol. But that symbol was given to families and men who fought the Crusades. So if you fought the Crusades against the infidels from the perspective of the Christians, those that were the Muslims. So if you had killed a lot of Muslims trying to liberate Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and you returned, you were rewarded with this symbol. Your family is able and is honored, so to say, to wear this symbol in your flag or the weapon of your family. But some of these families were very rich and very powerful. For example, in Kuik, that's a little city in the Netherlands in the south, Kuik was literally the ground or the country of the family of Kuik. But because they were so wealthy and so powerful, the whole city was known as Kuik. And it's still there. But because they had this symbol in their family flag, now it's a symbol of the city. So the symbol of the city, this merlet, this duck without feet and a beak, what was given to people if they slaughtered Muslims, is still there. Then you have this croissant, you have this writing, and it's even especially in Catholicism. It's a form of one of the older forms of Christianity. If you have, like, you go on a Christian Hajj, you have Santiago de Compostela. Maybe you ever heard of it. It's in the south of Spain. Not really in the south, but it's in Spain. And if you end your Hajj, so to say, you end in a big church, and there is a very big statue, and this statue is called Matamoros. In Spanish, it means the killer of the Moors, the Muslims. So you end your spiritual journey at a statue, and you see all decapitated Muslims lying like this, and you see a big guy on a white horse with a spear and a sword, and that's it. So it's even in the religious tradition, there's a lot of anti-Islam sentiments, vibes, and it's not like people wanted to kill Muslims nowadays, and it's like I said, it's so secular that nobody knows anymore. But to answer your question, it's very easy for them to tap into this almost cultural feeling of, oh yeah, that's the enemy. It's about Muslims, Islam. When you look at movies, for example, you always see like a terrorist Arab or a scary dark man, and he's talking Arabic, and it's ooh. And that is because it's very easy for Europeans to think that these are the enemies, because historically there were, of course, clashes and there were enemies. So yeah, of course, that is very easy for political parties, and a lot of political parties influence the media and the other way around. So something when we had these riots, right? But there were Maccabi Haifa and Maccabi Tel Aviv. There are two football clubs from Israel, and one of these teams from Tel Aviv came to Amsterdam because there was a football match against Ajax. But before the match started, they trashed the whole city. They took away all the Palestinian flags. They were chanting, "Oh, we are so happy. There are no children more in Gaza. We all killed them. There are no schools. There will never be life. Blah blah blah." Then they trashed taxi cabs. They molested one guy with chains. So in the end, people from Amsterdam started fighting back to this, because why would I let my whole city trashed and torn down? So they're starting to fight, and some of these people asked, let me show your passport, because he said we don't want to kick, so to say, innocent people. And he said, are you from Israel? And then they got beaten up. It's not a good thing, of course, let me be clear, but the media said it was about the fact that they are Jews. They called it the Jew hunt. They said, the Amsterdam people, especially Moroccan youth, and it said in the newspaper, Muslim youth attacked Jews. They had a Jew hunt in Amsterdam. But it wasn't about Jewishness. There were no Jewish schools attacked. There was no synagogue attacked. No Jewish people living in Amsterdam attacked. So it was about the hooligans fighting because they torn down these flags and they did all this crazy stuff. But the media spinned it, and they said, well, it was about Jews. And we even had, it just ended, I was checking the news, we even have like a crisis in Parliament because of this. Because after this happened, we had a debate. It's all in the Netherlands. If something bad happens or good, there's a debate 1 day or 2 days later. And during this debate, several ministers and political leaders said, yeah, anti-Semitism is in the DNA of Muslim youth. So he practically said, you are born with hate against Jews. And of course, some organizations like ours, we complained. We even sued one of the ministers because you cannot say it's discrimination, it's racism as well. So it was a lot of things, and they were not abiding the law, and they're in a position that it's almost impossible for you to say that, but they did. But the media still said, yeah, but it was because of the Jew hunt. It was because of but it was no Jew hunt. But the media influences big time. But now we have like a far-right government at the moment, because my old political leader, Geert Wilders, he is running the show now. So it's not a coincidence. I'm not surprised that this is happening, but it's very hard to fight it. So you have to fight it with all legal things that you have, and you can try to do something. And I think in about 4 years, maybe we have another government. But it is hard, and the media plays a big role, but also politicians and the historical context makes it easy to sell this narrative to the people. I even heard from people inside the party, because some people I still talk to, they said that they were celebrating the fact that this was happening, because they said, yeah, while these young Moroccan people are attacking this Jewish poor people who came just peacefully into the country, and all of a sudden they were attacked. Now we can implement our anti-Islam agenda, and we sell it as fighting anti-Semitism. So that's also, it's a tactic. It's just a system, unfortunately.
Assalamu alaikum. Firstly, I want to say I love you for the sake of Allah. I've admired you for a long time. I had two questions. Firstly, is it possible for us to also have the list of books that Sheikh asked for you to read? Maybe if it's already present, I apologize for the question. And secondly, it's about America. With your political expertise and your knowledge of both religions and history, how would you advise us to navigate through these times after what the election results have been like? Jazakumullah khair.
Well, I wrote the book, of course. It's called Murtad, Apostate. It was funny. I went to California, and it was Sheikh Hamza Yusuf and Imam Said Shakir. It was 2019. And I told them the book was translated into English, and I said maybe I can translate it into another language if people like to read it. And then one of them said, well, if you call it Murtad and you translate it into Urdu, it will be a one-way ticket for you. It was, of course, a joke. So no, it's also translated into Arabic and stuff. But in the book, in the back of the book, there's a list with all the books. So if you want to know it, you can find it on the internet, I think. So it was 102 articles and books, and the list is just like what sources I used. So it's when it comes to the United States, of course, I'm not a citizen of the U.S. My knowledge of U.S. politics is very small. I know some people. I know we got a lot of money from the United States organizations like the Horowitz Foundation, Pamela Geller. A lot of people here living in Florida and in New York, they give money to the Freedom Party, and they give money to other far-right organizations in Europe to push this narrative. We have to be pro-Zionist and against Islam. It's still happening, by the way. But besides that, it's, of course, I'm not an expertise. The only thing is that I know is that also in the U.S. there is a big, deep history of Islam already here, even before people came in the 60s and 70s, because I shared the story today. For example, New York was founded by the Dutch. When you go to New York, you see a lot of Dutch names, Stuyvesant and Brooklyn and Wageningen and Utrecht. It's all Dutch names. And it's true, it used to be New Amsterdam. And later on they made like a swap with the English. And they said, okay, you can have this, we can have another country. But in the Netherlands, it's not known and it's not shared, and I don't know if it's known here, but one of the first people, one of the first settlers that came to New York, New Amsterdam, was a guy called Anthony Janszoon of Salé. And his father was called Jan Janszoon, it was Jan, son of Jan. And he was a pirate, and he moved in the end, because of time I won't share the long version. But this pirate became Muslim. So he changed his name and he became Murad Reis. So Captain Murad, because he was a sailor. And he was a very wealthy man, and he lived in Morocco. He settled there and he died there. He married, and when he married this Moroccan girl, and he got 4 children. And one of these children was called Anthony Janszoon of Salé, because they lived in Salé, that's a place in Morocco. And Anthony Janszoon, of course, Anthony, son of Jan, living in Salé, because back then they were always named after the place they lived or were born. And he said, his father said, go to the New World, because I heard these stories that the Europeans are going there, so there must be like gold or whatever, there must be something they want to get. So go there. And that's what he did. In 1629, he went with his boat from, he ran from the northern of Africa, he went to Amsterdam, from Amsterdam he went to New Amsterdam, New York. And when he came there, he said, I want to buy land. But they said to him, who are you? Because you don't look like someone from Amsterdam. Because he was a very big guy, and he was kind of tanned. He was not a white guy, but he was not black. He was like in between. And they said, who are you? Why do you look like that? And he said, well, I'm Anthony Janszoon. And he said, okay, but are you a Christian? He said, no. Oh, you are a Turk. Because back then, everybody who was a Muslim was named a Turk because of the Ottoman Empire, and Europeans thought everything Islam related is Turkish, so he's a Turk. And he said, no, I'm not a Turk, I'm from Salé. He said, okay, you're Turkish. And then he said, I want to buy land. So you cannot buy land here because only Christians can buy. So if you were a Christian, you can buy, but you're not a Christian. And they said, okay, but I pay double the amount of money. He said, no, you're not a Christian. If you're a Muslim or a Turk, you cannot buy land here. He said, okay, I pay 3 times the money, and then I want to buy this land. And he said, no, you cannot buy it. You are not a Christian, you are a Turk. He said, I pay 4 times. And then he said, okay, maybe you can buy. So they sold it to him, and it's funny that when you read the historical letters, it says, money talks. And that's one of the oldest sentences here from the colony, and it was about this incident. And then he bought, but in the end, they kicked him out of the colony, because he didn't want to pay taxes to the church. Because he said, I'm not a Christian, I'm Muslim, so I'm not going to pay. And they tried to sue him for stupid stuff. His wife was not okay, and he screamed, and he was fighting his neighbors or whatever. All these small silly things. And he was, they said, no, he's not convicted for all these things, except for one. He pointed the gun at a slave owner from Portugal. He was apparently a slave owner of Portugal, and he had a slave, and he was mistreating this guy. And then he pointed his gun to this slave owner, and then this slave owner said, "Yeah, okay, what do you want me to do?" He set this guy free, or I'll shoot. So he set the guy free. So this slave became a free man because he lived with Anthony Janszoon of Salé. He said, "You can live here on my grounds, my ground. If people enter the border, so to say, we can shoot him. That's the law." And so he was free, but then that's the only thing he was convicted for, because you cannot threaten people. So, but in the end, this guy and these people, and he did it again. So there were 2 slaves who were freed by Anthony Janszoon of Salé, and they lived on his land. So it's very remarkable, even because he also brought the first Quran to Northern America. And it was brought by Anthony Janszoon of Salé. And because he was kicked out of the colony, he had to move to another part, and it was called Breukelen. And he developed it, and now it's called Brooklyn. So Brooklyn was really developed by a Muslim, half Moroccan, half Dutch Muslim. And he was the guy who brought the first Quran. And the funny thing is that his descendants are very famous, because Humphrey Bogart, like the musician, he is a descendant from this guy, Onassis. This is the wife of John F. Kennedy. She was a descendant, Harding, I think the 27th or the 29th president of the United States, who was a descendant. Vanderbilt family, very famous family, very rich, also descendant from this guy, Anthony Janszoon of Salé. So there's a lot of Islam and it's even before the Protestants came, because in 1667 then the English came and they said, okay, now it's U.S. as we want to see it. What is not even U.S. It was a British colony up till what is it, 1776 or something. So Islam was already here even before Protestant Christianity was here. So it's remarkable. So I think when it comes to Islam and the West, there is a lot of Islam in the West, even though a lot of Muslims and also non-Muslims don't know it. But it makes it easier maybe to navigate through these times, knowing that the people from way back, they just accepted it. They didn't like the guy, that was obvious. But in the end, he was one of the biggest landowners. He was not like a poor Muslim, or he was not mistreated. No, he was one of the richest, most influential persons. So you can find him. It's called Anthony Jansson of Saleh. He's a very interesting guy. So I hope this is an answer. So.
Barakallahu feek, jazakallahu khair. We just want to ask one last question, inshallah, if you don't mind, and I'll save it for myself. But if you could give some insight, because the brother's a little tired, he's had a long day, but just for everyone here, majority of people here are born Muslim. I want you to, if you could, from your perspective, give us some insight of the struggles of a revert, because a lot of times we might be excited and happy and welcome them and give them salam and hugs and kisses, but what is after that? And how was your experience? And what can we as a ummah do better, inshallah?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of reverts struggle, and it doesn't matter if they first were Hindu or Christian or atheist or whatever, because most of the time, not always, but most of the time, the family doesn't like it, your friends don't like it, and you become like almost alien in your own family. So most of the time people are very lonely. And of course, like you said in the beginning, it's mashallah and everybody's happy. But then you go home and there is no mashallah from other people. So people, they sometimes feel lonely because like it's Ramadan, my first Ramadan. And it's, like I said, it's different. I think it's related to the age. If you're very young, you need a lot of guidance and you need a lot of friends, so to say. Because I was old. I was 40 when I became Muslim. So I had my own family and my own house, my own money. I didn't care. Yeah, even though if everybody would hate me, I lived my life and my wife was with me. So I could do whatever I want. And if I wanted to pray, I pray. If I want to go to Masjid, I go to Masjid. Nobody's going to tell me I'm not able to, you cannot. But if you're 15 or 16 or maybe 19 and you're not married, you don't have your own house, you don't have your own money, and you're living with your parents who don't like the fact that you became Muslim, of course, it's very hard. So yeah, it would be good. I don't know if you already do that, but there are groups, so to say, to support new Muslims, so that maybe you can call these people, I think once or 2-3 times a week, support them, make sure that they come to the Masjid. If you want to find a man or a woman, depending on who you are, you want to get married, that there are people who help you with it, finding a good, stable person. That's very important. And also with Ramadan, my first Ramadan, and like I said, I'm not, I was funny in a way. My first Ramadan was very boring because normally you go home and there's the whole meals and it's like a party almost. But back then I ate like I don't know how you call it in English, but it's like a sandwich with a roast. It's a roasted sandwich with cheese. How do you call it? That's it. Okay, well, that was my first Ramadan meal because my wife asked, what do you want to eat? It's like special for you, right? So I said, I don't matter, do something easy. And that was it. So I couldn't be mad because, it's my own fault. But I thought, and some people say, how was your first Ramadan? It was a party and all these people. I said, no, it was like this sandwich, cheese, and that's it. I got 2. But I can imagine if you're 16 or 17 and you're back home and nobody wants you to pray or say Bismillah before you start eating, or they don't like the fact that you are praying, or they take away your Quran. You hear stuff like that. Or people really get kicked out of the house. I know a sister in the Netherlands, she lived with her grandparents because her own parents died when she was young, and they kicked her out. And she was only 18. She wasn't married. She was still in school. So it's kind of harsh. But if there is a group that supports you, that helps you, especially the girls, because you are seen easier as a Muslim because you have a hijab, you're a target. Most of the time, you're a little weaker than boys. I think that would be very important. That you support, like a support team. I know when ICNA has like Why Islam, right? Now maybe that's something, a group of people like that support new Muslims. And also when it comes to knowledge, of course, because in the beginning I didn't know how to pray. That was the first day, it was funny, the first day I became Muslim, I was invited by the royal family of Saudi Arabia to do Hajj. Because I was, of course, in the media and a politician. And I thought, yeah, it's kind of strange if I say yes, because, and I thanked them, of course, and it was very nice and generous offer. But I say, I don't know how to pray. I cannot recite one verse of the Quran. I don't know how to do wudu. So it doesn't make any sense. I'm doing the most important thing spiritually, being on this place where everybody wants to go without knowing what I'm doing there. So I said, let me first learn a little bit. But that's also important, that people learn how to pray, because it took me like maybe over 100 times before I even could say Fatiha, the surah. And then, of course, you have all these movements that are new because you're not brought up with it. And I did it so many times, I did it wrong. So, and that's, but if there's nobody that teaches you, you can look it up YouTube, but maybe people pronounce it wrong. Maybe it's not a good example at all. You don't know. So that it is very important that people guide you, so to say. So that will work. Yeah, no.
All right, Jazakumullah khair, barakallah feek. We ask Allah to bless Brother Joram, make dua for him. May Allah keep him steadfast and use us for his deen, and accept Ya Rabbil Alamin. Jazakumullah khair.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما